Hey everyone, it's Daniel Moyer here with Briggs Stratton Energy Solutions. Welcome. Today's webinar is going to be talking about the future of net metering. Now, on the screen, I just want to point out that we both have SolarArc and EG4 inverters are now supported by us, and excited to work with both of those great inverter companies. Stay tuned for upcoming webinars where we talk more about EG4 and more about SolarArc as well. Couple of housekeeping items before we get started. This course is approved for NABCEP continuing education credits. It qualifies for the codes continuing education category. So at the end of this presentation, I will have my email will pop up. Please email me your full first and last name, and I'll go ahead and email you out your credits. Additionally, the chat has been disabled, but the Q&A is open. So at any time during the webinar, put in your questions, your comments, and we'll address them as we go forward. Lastly, this is being recorded. Everybody who's attending will get a recording and will also get a copy of all the slide decks as well. Let's get started. First off, NABCEP, one of my favorite events of the entire year. The NABCEP Continuing Education Conference will be in Milwaukee coming up in March. Hopefully it warms up a little bit before March. This is a great conference. It is a conference where it's more than just walking around at booths, getting free trinkets. It's a learning event, and most of the day you spend learning from some of the best trainers in the industry. It will be in Milwaukee this year, which is the home of Briggs Stratton. So we're doing a little special event, a kickoff event at the Briggs Stratton headquarters, which is also in Milwaukee. Excited to announce that we will have Ryan Mayfield will be giving a talk during our kickoff pre-event. It's the Monday before the full conference starts. Ryan's going to be talking about NFPA 855 fire codes and safety. So come get a free breakfast. Come listen to some of the exhibitors that we're going to have there. Come listen to Ryan Mayfield. We're going to give you lunch, and then we're going to do a tour of our museum, the Briggs Stratton Museum, which goes back 100 plus years of the history of the company. We're going to take you out to our power garage, our power lab, where we have some of the equipment, a real live working system as well. We're also going to be offering you free transportation back to downtown to where the NABCEP conference is happening. I will put in the email after I send out a link to RSVP for this event, or you can use this QR code that's on your screen right now as well. Again, a NABCEP event is one of my favorite in the entire year, and I hope to see everybody there. So net metering, we're going to talk about net metering. And first, let's just talk about kind of the basics of it. So, a lot of times before batteries had become very common, we would have photovoltaics, solar panels up on a roof. We would have either microinverters or a string inverter. During the day, that solar would be sent down to the string inverter or microinverters. It would first then power any loads that were on in a home at that moment. Any excess would be sent back to the grid. That's why we see a bidirectional arrow there from the inverter back to grid. Now, that was great. It helped get our renewable energy industry off the ground. It promoted the install of solar, and I'll get into the basics of it here, but that credit that you generate during the day, usually during summer, could then be used up at night or in the winter, and you had an annual true-up, where at the end of the anniversary of when you had installed your system, the electrical company would send you a bill, your true-up bill, and ideally, if the solar installer had sized the photovoltaic systems correctly to the loads in your home, you wouldn't owe the utility anything, and the utility wouldn't owe you anything, and you'd have that net metering. Now, things have changed, and I'm going to explain why a lot of things have changed, both from the perspective of a utility and really the perspective of what we think in the solar industry, the reasons it's changed. But suffice it to say now that in a lot of ways, you need a battery in order for a homeowner to see a financial return on a photovoltaic system. A lot of what I'm going to talk about today is specific to NEM 3.0, which is in California. But that term NEM 3.0 or net billing tariff is now started to apply to many other states around the country. Notably, Illinois is now become one of the most recent adopters of net billing tariff versus net energy metering. And again, I'll explain a little bit more about those terms here in a second. We can now use a battery essentially to, now that we can't send excess solar back to the grid for that one-to-one credit, we get a wholesale rate on that. What we're going to do now is store that solar power in a battery and then discharge that batteries to homes' loads at nighttime. So we're doing everything in our power, sorry the pun, to not use the grid. If we really want to give that extra level of resiliency and backup to a homeowner, we're almost certainly going to install a generator. And that's what's exciting about working for Briggs Stratton, is that we both do generators and energy storage systems. And there's some examples where a generator might actually be the correct answer for somebody. And I'm thinking in the context of net metering, maybe they live somewhere where it is cheap electricity. Maybe they live somewhere where they have favorable solar interconnection policies. Well, they could do solar, send solar back to the grid, and then if the grid goes down, the anti-islanding nature of those microinverters or string inverters will immediately turn off the solar system, and then we could back up the home using a generator. But if we're in a situation where we don't have net metering, we might have expensive electricity, we can then use a battery system to store that and provide the backup as necessary. There's a lot of instances where there's homes that don't have gas lines. The HOA doesn't allow a generator, so there's not the ability to install a generator in the first place, and that's where battery storage comes in. Point being is that we're excited here to be able to offer you both solutions together with our inverter partners like Solarc and like EG4. So just to take a step back, right? Net metering policies are govern how utilities compensate their utility customers for the excess solar production that they send back to the grid. So as I said earlier, under older net metering policies, NEM, net energy metering policies, you send excess kilowatt hours to the grid, you get a credit for that. You can then use that credit up at night during the winter. But what happened is that we now are migrating over to what's known as net billing tariff, or the idea that you're going to have that one-to-one credit has gone away. So what that made was really a major shift in how a homeowner that has solar can see a financial return on their system. So on the right here, we're kind of looking at the consumption, right? The consumption here is what we're looking at right here with this gray. So a lot of people wake up in the morning, they start to use power, getting the breakfast going, getting the kids out to school. They go to work. The consumption of a home drops down when everybody's at work, and then it ramps back up at night when everybody comes home and we turn the TV on, the lights on, and we're making dinner. And then it drops back down at nighttime when we're all asleep. That is kind of opposite of what solar does. If you look at this orange kind of peak here in the middle of the day, that's when solar is producing. That's the opposite of when we're consuming it. So what we need to do under a new net billing tariff is capture and store all of the excess solar that otherwise would have been sent to grid, this kind of empty area here, into a battery, and then shift that energy to cover the home's loads into the evening. And you can see that shown there in the blue as well. Another thing to keep about, is these batteries, they're not like a generator, right? A generator is just sitting there waiting for an outage, and it's going to start up and back up the home. A battery can do that, but a battery can also be like what I like to call as a grid interactive appliance, where the battery can give the homeowner control of when they can store energy and discharge that energy, not just from solar, but also from grid potentially as well. So what we're looking at here is kind of a solar-only system where they don't have the ability to store it. Solar is going to produce when it produces, cover the home's loads when it's being covered, and then send the excess back to grid. So if somebody that doesn't have any solar at all, right, they're just going to get an electric bill from the utility every month. If we do solar only, what we can do is we can offset some of the bill by powering the home's loads that otherwise would have been running during the day, and then offset some of that bill. But by adding a battery, right, we get the most savings. And it's not easy to really quantify this. And I'll give you an example. Maybe you're a retired couple. Maybe the homeowner's retired and they spend most of their time at home during the day. And I can't wait to retire, and I'll go to bed at relatively early hour. I consume most of my electricity during the day. I do my laundry during the day. I'm watching TV during the day. That means that when solar is producing, that's when I'm consuming. So my offset, or the percent that I'll be able to offset my electrical bill, might go up more for somebody that works from home, right? That's spending more time at home using that energy. Whereas me and my family, right, we all go off to work, we all go off to school, so we don't consume a lot during the day. We consume a lot in the evening. We have to do our laundry in the evening because we're not at home during the day. So our offset might not be as much. So this, although this came right off the SolarArc website here, this offset is not set in stone. And really, you need to understand when you're consuming power. In a lot of ways, that's easy to model now with a lot of these Aurora, Open Solar, Energy Sage proposal tools that can download 15-minute interval data, accurately model not only was when the solar going to produce, but also when you are consuming, down to the 15-minute interval data in some cases as well. Also keep in mind that the price of electricity is not stagnant throughout the entire day. Time of use rates, which a lot of people are being forced onto now, make that price of electricity different during certain times of the day. Usually in off-peak hours during the night, during the day, it's the lowest price. And then there's sometimes a partial peak or a super peak, and those usually coincide with those hours that people are coming home from work, the 5 to 9 or the 4 to 10 as well. And so that's important to understand, because if we're sticking with just solar modules only, just photovoltaics, what this is showing right here is that, during the day, we're consuming electricity right here. When the sun comes up, the solar starts to produce and sends power back to the grid. But that also coincides with that time of use rate where the solar exports, when we're send power back to the grid, it's being quantified in a price. It's the least value is when we're sending it back. But just so happens when we come home from work, when we come home for school, the price of electricity goes expensive because of those peak use, those time of use rates. But also our solar production starts to taper off as well. So essentially what we're doing is we're buying the most expensive electricity when our solar is doing the least to contribute to us not buying. And then when we are selling electricity, we're selling it during the cheapest time of the day as well. And that's the key, right? That's really where batteries are going to make this financial return on a photovoltaic system possible. Let's step back a minute and just kind of see where we came from. So net energy metering, or a NEM 1.0, it was from 1995. And if you think about it, that's 30 years ago. The idea that we've been able to sell power back to the grid is still somewhat of a relatively new idea, although 30 years ago is kind of old. And what we're seeing here is photovoltaic system flowing down into the home, powering any loads that might be on at that moment, And if we have any excess, we're going to send it back out a meter back to the utility grid. If during nighttime, what we have is solar is not producing, we can consume electricity back through our meter, back to power the home's loads. So when we were selling that solar back, we were getting that one-to-one credit. And when we were consuming, we were getting that one-to-one credit. And you can see that kind of demonstrated here, that this green right here is us self-consuming. This yellow right here was us sending back to the grid. And then this blue is us consuming at night when there was no solar production. And ideally, we're having that net metering done relatively well. And at the end of the year, because remember, in summer, you're going to produce a lot more than you consume overall. In winter, you're going to use more. That if we've sized that system, we're going to be 0-0. The credit was in kilowatt hours. NEM 2.0 came along in 2013. Was essentially the same as last time, although they're going to start charging us an interconnection fee. They're going to add what's known as a solar tax, where every month, even if we are making well extra than what we use, we're still getting charged just for the privilege of being connected to the grid. And those time of use rates became mandatory when we went solar. Well, it changed. It changed in 2023. Essentially, what this is showing now, and I believe you had a couple of years to implement it if you got your application in. What this now shows, and I'm not sure why NREL put 2 meters here. Usually there's just 1 meter. But now when solar is sent back down to a home, it still powers any loads that are on at the home at that moment. When we sell excess solar back to the grid, we're now sending it back to the utility, but we're no longer getting that credit in kilowatt hours. We're getting that credit in billing, or they're assigning a monetary value to what that kilowatt hour is worth at the moment you inject it into the grid. And that amount is based on the wholesale rate of electricity that would otherwise be purchased on the grid at that moment. And it's a fraction of what they would charge for the retail rate. But when you consume it, we're still coming off the grid and we're still coming back down to the home to power the loads. But notice now is that we're being net billing tariff. The amount of money being assigned to that kilowatt hour is what we're going to get compensated with. But when we consume, we're now being charged at the retail rate. So what does that mean for a homeowner? Well, it means for a homeowner that when we're sitting down trying to sell a system, we need to sometimes refocus the conversation. The solar by itself, unless they consume a lot during the day, they're probably not going to see a financial return, that payback period of a photovoltaic system before the system is aged out or the warranty is expired or the system is broken. But if we can add a battery to the system, capture the solar that otherwise would have been essentially wasted going back to the grid, store it in the battery, discharge it at homes, loads at night, we can show that financial payback, even though we're adding a potentially tens of thousands of dollars worth of batteries and other hybrid inverter infrastructure that you might need on that. But guess what? That homeowner now does get backup. They do get resiliency. If the grid goes down, those microinverters or those string inverters can, if they have existing solar, using a battery and a hybrid inverter, create a microgrid for the home and keep that existing solar working, create that microgrid in the home, and keep their lights on for the long run. So, why did things change? From the utilities perspective, in some ways I get this. The utilities always kind of said 2 things. They always said the duck curve and rich people, old rich people, essentially. Let's start with the duck curve. And that's what you see on the right-hand side here. So what this is saying is just showing here is essentially the demand on the grid throughout a day. And what this is showing here is kind of during the days over the years during summer, um, the demand in 2015, right? There's some demand on the grid in the middle of the night, and the demand on the grid was pretty similar during the day. Yeah, it dropped a little, and yeah, it went up a little, and when everybody comes home. But over the years, as more and more people, specifically rich people who are homeowners that could afford solar, added solar to their homes, the demand on the electrical grid became less and less. And at one point during the summer, during the day, just a couple years ago, so many people had just solar on their house that the demand on the grid or the price of the electricity went negative during the day. And the utilities said, you know what, that's unsustainable. We can't afford to keep power plants, some natural gas power plant, running idle all day just for you who has solar only to come home at night and turn on your TVs, plug in all your loads, and rely on us to provide all that power. I think of somebody who owns a Tesla or somebody who owns an electrical car. They got solar on their house. They got an electric car. They think they're the greenest people on earth. They're driving around all day in their electrical car. They got solar on their house that's generating electricity. But then they come home at night and they plug in that electric car. That electricity that's charging your car is not coming from your solar panels. That's already gone, right? Electricity is used the moment it's created. They're relying on some fossil fuel power plant that's been running idle all day to charge up their electrical car. So this is kind of the argument that a lot of the utilities used to eliminate the idea that you can get that one-to-one credit and charge your electric car up in the evening for free because you injected a bunch of power during the day. They were saying that those people weren't, they're paying substantially less than the costs that they were receiving from the grid to keep that power plant running all idle all day. And they were essentially saying it's not sustainable and we got to change. We got to sound now, look, if you sell excess solar back to the grid, you're going to get the wholesale rate. When you consume it, you're going to get the retail rate. In a lot of ways, what they're doing is forcing people to get batteries. So in the long run, if enough people adopt solar and adopt batteries, and we become this distributed generation and distributed storage on all of our homes, at some point in the future, we won't need the utilities, and we can become a community of our own microgrid. So what do we say to that? What did the solar industry kind of debunk a lot of those myths? Well, one of the things, they said that they threw out this, it's going to cost $2.3 billion a year for all these people who went solar. One of the ways they came up with that large figure is they essentially said that the people who went solar and didn't purchase electricity from the grid should be counted as the cost to other utility customers. And I remember hearing a great webinar. They said it like this, that say you have a vegetable garden and you grow some carrots and you grow some lettuce. And if you harvest that carrots and lettuce, you wouldn't otherwise be buying the lettuce or the carrots from the grocery store. So should the grocery store say that we're losing, we're having to raise our prices or we're losing out because you didn't come into the store to buy it? That was a great analogy that I really liked. And if any reason, we need more generation, not less, to meet the electrification demands. People going heat pumps, people using electric cars. A lot of ways, if there's no solar payback, there's no solar and batteries being installed because the people doing the batteries were the solar companies. Going with net billing tariff really puts us at odds with the decarbonization strategy of a lot of our states and federal government. Another risk is that there's states out there, right? I do acknowledge that something needed to change. California did reach that solar saturation point, but um, there's other states that are looking at what California, what some of these other states are doing before they've reached that solar saturation point, and they're going to adopt these net billing tariffs before the people in that state have had a chance to adopt solar using those favorable agreements. So in a lot of ways, we need a balanced approach, right? We could have had a ramp down. I agree. The duck curve, the people who could afford solar, we're driving this essentially negative price of electricity during the day. But we need a more balanced approach, not a solar cliff. So there's a great study there. You can read more about it. And I'd also say that just as we were getting going, there were a lot of programs for low-income people and apartments that not renters that were being able to take advantage of this solar revolution. But it's here. This was a great graph right here. For 3 hours, April 5th of last year, during the evening, batteries were the largest single contributor to the California's utility grid. So down here is nuclear. That's Diablo Canyon chugging along. Right up here, geothermal. Right, that's Geyserville up here in California chugging along. This is large hydro contributing, natural gas power plants, wind turbines, Altamont Pass and down south. This was all our solar during the day. And then look at this. All that solar was being able to be charged and then discharge those batteries over that 3 hours. And then what we were able to do is then ramp down, right? The duck curve is kind of falling off right here. And we were able to let our natural gas kind of take over as well. Looking at this notably, if I'm reading this right, that's all imports. That's us importing electricity from another state right there as well. And this wasn't the case if in just a couple years ago. Really, it took the idea that we can have reliable, safe energy storage batteries to store this excess solar here to discharge it during the evening as well. And I would imagine the solar it would have been greater here because some of the solar has got to be going into the battery to charge it up as well. A lot of the resources I got off of this came from California Solar and Storage Association. If you're here in California, I would really encourage you to join this association. If you're in a different state, there are a lot of other local state SEIA, Solar Energy Industry Association affiliates. We did have a huge hit to the industry with this net billing tariff. I would have said it could have been worse if it wasn't for the work of CalSA. Consider joining today. And a lot of the stuff that I researched to create today's presentation came from what's known as the members only page on the California Solar and Storage Association's website. One of the resources I found here was on the bottom left-hand side. And what this is showing us here is that net billing tariff export rate. So it's showing us the price you get paid for every kilowatt hour you send back to the grid for a given month of the year at a certain hour of the day. And you can see here that, we're paying 30, 40, 50 cents a kilowatt hour retail rate, but they're paying us a penny to send it back into the grid. And, even in these other parts, it's 6 cents a kilowatt hour right here. Everybody's eyes really like to go kind of down here to this green right here, where that is the highest amount of money you're going to get. And what does it say? You get $1 a kilowatt hour. And that corresponds with, it looks like, 8 o'clock at night right here. So sun's usually not up at 8 o'clock. But if you read the rules carefully, if we have charged an energy storage system with renewables, with solar, and we have renewable energy sitting in our battery, we can program our battery to discharge to grid and get that dollar a kilowatt hour. So if we have a system, for example, what I'm showing you right here with the Solarc, you can get in there and program this Solarc system connected up with the Briggs Stratton battery to discharge the battery to grid and make that money back, the so-called power hours. And it's an opportunity to really see a big financial return in a short amount of time during the year. And what I'm showing you here is kind of in the programming screen in a Solarc, where what you can do is sell to the grid almost the entire battery. Maybe we'll leave 5% left in the battery, but we're going to discharge that battery all the way down. And then guess what? When the time of use rates get cheap, we can charge that battery back up. Notably, you cannot sell power back to the grid that you've charged the battery from the grid, but if it's from renewables, absolutely the rules say that you can sell back to the grid. But we'll just, charge the battery up a little bit to that 20%. So another way to think about this, and we're kind of going back to photovoltaics only, is, I talked earlier about the consumption curve, the duck curve here, that in the morning we use a little bit, less during the day, more at night. But our solar curve, right, the production curve of our solar kind of occurs right in the middle of the day. Well, Aurora Solar kind of had an interesting article about this. And again, you're going to get this link and you can read more about this right here, that if you face your solar panels west, essentially, you can shift the production curve to more closely align with the consumption curve. So this dark blue right here is us self-consuming during low peak. This light blue is us sending power back to the grid at low peak. And this kind of peach color here is us selling back at, or self-consuming right here at peak rates. And there's a little sliver right there of us selling back during peak rates. And what it's showing us down here is that if we wanted a solar system to produce the most amount of kilowatt hours in a given year in the northern hemisphere, we would want to point it south. That would make the most sense for the production, for the good of the grid, I would argue. But if we take a step back and we want to see when is the value of that solar going to be the greatest, even though we have less production, it's not pointing south. It's actually pointing west. And you can see here that, although we've had this huge blue right here, and we have this self-consume right here, that light blue, the export is only worth 23%. But we consume on our solar right here, it's actually more value from the system as well. So looking at it, what we do is we shift the production curve to align more with the consumption curve. We self-consume later into the evening during those time of use rates. Sun's setting in the west, we're coming home, but we're still capturing that later into the evening. Also, what we are selling back, that little sliver is now slightly bigger sliver, but we're now sending back to the grid during those kind of more favorable hours as well. Another way to think about it is, and again, this is all just with solar right here, is we don't think about shifting the production curve, but we actually shift our consumption curve. And one way to do that is with Lumen, Span, Savant. They have load control systems that can turn on and off loads during certain times of the day. So I can think of an example where maybe an electric hot water heater. Electric hot water heater is keeping water warm all day long. We can keep that water heater on when solar is producing. Water heater in a lot of ways is just a thermal battery, and they're usually pretty well insulated. Let's make a hot water during the day when solar is being produced that would otherwise be sent back to the grid at no cost, for no value, and then turn this hot water heater off when the sun goes down, when we start consuming. And I could also think of a pool pump, EV chargers, lots of other applications or smart thermostats where we adjust them. So the idea here is that load control is going to become very key to this future of our grid, that not only are we determining when we produce by maybe having more west-facing arrays, but also when we consume by using smart load control systems to better align our production and our consumption curves. So stick with, and I don't have specifics for other states, but I had, some questions that I always got asked. So when you went on that net metering 2.0 and you got signed up, you had a 20-year grandfather, right? You're in, you got 20 years of this net metering agreement. So you got a lot of people out there that are still on this net metering 2.0. Nobody's left on NEM 1.0 because that was 20 years ago. Very few, if anybody. But the NEM 2.0, say they have solar on their house and they're under NEM 2.0, but they want to sell the house. Do the people buying the house inherit that NEM 2.0, that very favorable net agreement? Yes, they do. Say they're 8 years into their NEM 2.0, the people buying the home would essentially have the remaining 12 years left over of that NEM 2.0. And that's a great sales pitch for somebody buying a home, because that, as I told you earlier, NEM 2.0 lets you use the grid as your battery. It lets you sell that excess solar during the day, during the summer, then use up all that excess solar onto one-to-one credit at night, in the evening. And that model allowed people to have 5 or 6 year paybacks. They went out and spent $20,000 on a solar system. They made that money back in 5 years. And then every 5 years after that, they're making another 20 grand, and they could see a huge financial return on that. We talked about earlier that maybe wasn't sustainable for the grid as a whole, but that allowed solar photovoltaics to start to compete against some of the big oil and the big utilities. Maybe they're on NEM 2.0 and they want to add a battery, because they do, they don't need to add a battery to see the financial return, because they can use the grid as their battery. But maybe they want to add a battery because they're getting frequent outages and they want to keep the power on when the grid goes out. Can they add a battery without altering that net metering status? Yes, they can. The bottom one is another thing that I always found interesting is, so say they have NEM 2.0. And when they first got on NEM 2.0, they didn't have an electric car. They had gas furnaces, but now they have heat pumps. And they want to add more solar to their system. Can they? And yes, they can, but there's kind of a trick. So imagine they have 8,000 watt worth of solar panels up on the roof, and they have an 8,000 watt inverter. That means that if you were to add more solar to it, let's say they add 2,000 more watts to solar, during the middle of the day, having 10,000 watts of solar is never going to produce more than 8, because the inverter, or the ability to turn that DC to AC, is kind of capped at 8,000 watts. So why would somebody want to add more solar, 2,000 more watts to solar, if they're never going to produce 8,000 watts in the middle of the day? Well, in the morning, And in the evening, when the sun isn't fully up and we're not getting that direct sun on the solar panels, the 8,000 watt array isn't producing 8,000 watts. It's getting maybe 6,000, we'll say. So by adding that extra solar, that DC capacity to the solar, we're not necessarily going to let them produce more peak power during any point during the day, but it allows them to produce more power in the morning and into the afternoon when we're not getting any inverter clipping. And we could probably spend an entire hour talking about inverter clipping, but the idea here is that you can add solar to a system if the production of the system is currently limited by the inverter size. There are some other ways to add solar, some non-exporting systems as well that would require batteries. Reach out to one of our business development managers and we could talk more about that as well. So if the inverter currently has headroom, right, you got 8,000 watts inverter, but only 6,000 watt of solar, you cannot go out there and add 2,000 watts without changing that interconnection agreement. So NEM 2.0 is gone. Net metering in a lot of states is gone. So what are we going to do? Are we just going to stop and sit back and say we're done? We're going to close up shop? No, we're going to keep continuing. And it is still possible to go out there, install solar, install batteries on somebody's home, and still have them see a financial return on the entire investment, the payback period. It's going to take longer, but it absolutely can be done. But we have to kind of shift how we think about sizing systems. Now, what I got on this screen comes off of a webinar that I attended with Josh Brum. If you ever want to learn something, Josh Brum is one of the experts in the industry. So what we do with the system is we talk to a customer, and this goes with any sales. We talk to the customer, find out what their motivations are, how do they envision the system working for them, and what kind of budget they have. And then you can kind of get people to fall into these different types of buckets here. So on the left is bucket one. These are the people that have solar, and they simply want the fastest financial return. They don't get many outages, and if they do get outages, they don't really care about them because they got a portable generator. So what we're going to do with them is we're going to size a smaller battery system and really focus on the return of an investment. So we're going to sell them a system here that produces solar during the day to cover their home's loads during the day. And then we're going to look using 15-minute interval data from the utility to determine how much energy they use at night, and then size the battery to store just that much of electricity. So during the day, they essentially will run on solar, or maybe even just charge the battery during the day and not even cover the home's loads. Charge up that battery at night during the time of use rates, and then discharge the battery during time of use. Maybe not even last all the way into the night. It's just charge that battery during the day, run them through time of use, and try and get as far into the evening as they can. That's the fastest payback. So they're not buying 60 cents per kilowatt hour when they're home during the evening. Bucket two, they do have some concern about occasional power outages, but they don't necessarily need the whole home backup, but they still want that fast payback, more of a balanced approach. So we are going to account for those daytime loads, subtract them from that energy production, and then again, size the battery to get them through the night so that they're not really consuming power during the night. So that's probably the best one, right? Solar during the day, powering all the home's loads. Then we need a little bit of extra solar so we can charge up the battery to have enough juice in the battery to get them through the night. Bucket three, this is kind of where return on investment goes out the window, because what we're doing now is we're sizing the battery and the solar to essentially off-grid the home. And what that is going to end up being is a way oversized system in summer, but a perfect system in the winter. These are the people that are, I would call grid defectors, where they could otherwise easily have access to grid, but they're living in town off the grid because they have a system that was sized for the worst solar insolation for the maximum amount of usage. So usually I probably people are going to end up in bucket here too. Um, Go to Aurora Solar, go to Open Solar, use these solar proposal tools, and they're going to map all this stuff out for you and show the homeowner a great proposal that you put together using these proposal tools and show them the different buckets. You might start with bucket 2 and 3. Start big. You can always go down in price, but you can never go back up in price. Here's an example of what some of those packages might look like. We got our Solar 15K on the far right, paired up with our Simplify 6.6 battery. That gives us whole home backup because it has 200 amp pass through. In the middle, right, 2 stacks of our 6.6 battery with the Solar 12K. I probably got to update this slide, everybody. That Solar 8K, I believe, has gone away, and that's with a single battery there as well. EG4 is an exciting inverter partner as well. So we talked a lot about the grid, the future of the grid, backup, time of use. What really made all of this possible is the advent of more powerful inverters like that 18K PV EG4 you see there, like those solar converters that do have that 200 amp pass through where we can back up the entire home. Also, the advent of safe, reliable, quick to install batteries. Now, of course, I'm going to sit here and promote our battery. I really like it. I think it looks great. It stacks together pretty quickly. It has status LED lights on top. It's either floor or wall mounted. But, and I'll take a step back here and just be an advocate for the renewable energy industry that the advent of lithium iron phosphate batteries that were affordable is what's going to drive this energy revolution of distributed generation and distributed storage. LFP, right, is not as energy dense as maybe cobalt-based chemistries are. It's not as fast to charge or discharge, although we do have pretty quick charge and discharge rates. It's that the batteries are safe and they have a lot of cycle life. Our Simplify 6.6 battery on the left-hand side there, I can have up to 6,000 cycles at a C/2 discharge rate. We have a 15-year warranty on this. So every cycle once per day is, 6,000 divided by 365 comes out to like 16 years. Now, if you do want to charge and discharge the battery a little quicker, 0.75 charge rate, that's about an hour and 15 minutes. That's going to shorten the life cycle up a little bit, but most people don't charge or discharge a battery that quickly. So, like I said, there's a lot of companies out there with lithium iron phosphate batteries. So how do we set ourselves apart here at Briggs & Stratton? One is that we provide a battery that works with a lot of different inverter partners. We let you choose the inverter company that you prefer to work with. We don't have integrated inverters into our batteries so that if you need more energy, more batteries, you can add that. Or if you need more power, more inverters, you can add that without having to add them at the same time. So you can scale power and energy separately. We've done some innovative things in our battery so that it can work in colder temperatures without the need for heaters. Now, of course, if you're in Milwaukee right now when it's -10, you're going to need to keep it indoors or use one of our heating options on some of our other batteries. But we can go down to 14 degrees without the need for heaters. Some of those heaters can be up to 300 watts in some of those batteries. Additionally, it's more than just the hardware, right? We at Briggs Stratton here are here to help promote your install company. We have marketing programs. We have business development managers, lead generation, our warranty, our tech support. And I'd also say, thinking about that net metering 1.0, 30 years ago or even 20 years ago, there were a lot of names in this industry that aren't around anymore. We were my previous job, we were a SunPower dealer. We installed a lot of SunPower, and SunPower is no longer around. We were left, and our homeowners were left with a product that wasn't being supported by the manufacturer anymore. With Briggs Stratton, we're a 115-year-old company. We're not going anywhere, and we're going to be here to support you through that 15-year warranty and beyond. As I said earlier, sometimes batteries aren't the right answer for everybody. Sometimes it's a generator. We offer air-cooled generators all the way from 13 to 26 kilowatts. And then we have commercial that goes up to 30 to 200. And when you get into those commercial systems, some of those become 208 or 480 three-phase. All of the air-cooled units are 240-volt split phase. We have done some unique things with these generators, such as NG Max, which essentially allows our generators to not derate when they run on natural gas. If you look at some of our competitor generators, they might say they have a 20 kilowatt generator. That's when it runs on propane. If you run it on natural gas, it derates down to 18.5. That 22K generator you see there in the middle, that's 22K, whether you're on propane or natural gas. Of course, if you're going to do a generator and not an energy storage system, you're going to need a transfer switch, which we have available. But if you combine the two, and that's exactly what I'm going to be talking about at NABCEP, you combine batteries and generators together, you're going to feed that generator output into a solar or an EG4 gen port, so that when the power goes out, the home's going to coast on batteries. The batteries start to get low. The Solar or EG4 can send a two-wire signal to start to the generator, start the generator, run it hard for just a couple of hours, charge the batteries, take over the home's loads, and then shut it off. Thanks to everyone sticking with me. We do have a number of promotions going on, one of them being the IQ program. So I think some of these are a little outdated. Sorry, I didn't update that, but scan that QR code. Reach out to me, sales, and I'll send you the most updated promotions we have going. Essentially, if you've done one of our installs, we would love to have you be part of our IQ loyalty program. You get a number of benefits. Most notably is a rebate on every battery you install. It's $100 per battery, not $150. Sorry about that typo. But we are keeping the $500 second bonus, which means you haven't done our batteries. You do your first install, we'll give you $1,000. You do a second install, we'll give you another $500. So just kind of final thoughts. And a lot of this also kind of goes back to the elimination of the ITC right now as well. We have to be very creative in how we approach our customers. We need to understand our local and state incentives where we can pick up the pieces from what's been left over from not only the hit to us from the federal loss of the ITC, but also the loss of these net metering policies. It was kind of a 1-2 punch right here. Reach out. Briggs Stratton Energy Solutions has resources available. Reach out to your California Solar and Storage Associations, your other state-based solar and storage associations. They have the resources to help you navigate the specific net metering policies of your states, but also any state-based incentives that are kind of stepping in to take over where the feds left off. Generous net metering incentives, helped build this country's solar market. It's not going to help us anymore with these net billing tariffs. But that doesn't have to spell an end to solar across the country or in states where we've eliminated net energy. Figure out the right size system, a battery and solar to help get a homeowner still that financial return while also providing that resiliency as well. It's going to be more than just solar and storage. It's also going to need load control. I mean, a lot of these EVs, you can program them, you plug them in right away when you get home, but they don't start charging until later. I want to thank everybody. My name is Daniel Moyer. If you need NAPCEP credits, NAPCEP is energy storage training at basco.com. Give us a call and we can help you out. Any questions? Again, everyone's going to get a recording. Everyone's going to get the slide deck. If you have any questions, put them into the Q&A right now. And everyone, have a good rest of your week and good rest of your day. Stay warm out there if you're in a cold area of the country. Okay, with that, no questions. Thank you again, everybody, and we'll see everybody next time. Thank you, Kelly.